theyeshiva.net.
So thank you very much to my dear friend and classmate, Rabbi Mendel Schmutkin. Thank you very much to the very esteemed Rabbi Yisrael Schmutkin, Rabbi Samuels, Rabbi Senderovic, to all of the esteemed rabbis behind this monumental occasion, a great simcha, great joy, a celebration of Torah learning, a celebration of Jewish law, of Jewish tradition, of Jewish heritage, of Jewish unity, really a celebration of Jewish history. And thank you to all of my dear brothers and sisters from the entire state of Wisconsin who are gathered here this evening for this special occasion, and people who are joining us from wherever they're joining us for this conclusion, Siyum, of the great work of one of the most seminal figures in the history of the Jewish people, known as Rambam or Maimonides. And I thank you, Rabbi Schmutkin, for the privilege of this great invitation and the honor to be able to address all of you, my dearest friends, on this very special evening, as so many Jews conclude the 39th cycle of learning the works of Maimonides of the Rambam and commencing the 40th cycle of learning the works of the man who's known as the Great Eagle, the Nesher Hagadol, the Great Eagle of Jewish history, indeed, a very befitting description of the personality and the persona of the Rambam, Maimonides. I'd like to address this evening some of the historical dimensions of the life of this great man whom we honor tonight, whose work we honor tonight, whose work we study tonight and continue to study, because some people have such an impact on Jewish history that even close to a millennium later, their impact is so vivid and so present in the world of the Jewish people that we actually marvel on how a person who lived such a long time ago in a different milieu, in a different country, in different atmosphere, with different challenges, can have such an impact and still we feel so close to him. We feel close to his heart, to his mind, and to his pen. He's not the only figure in Jewish history who we feel so close to, though they have lived so many years ago. Abraham and Sarah lived many years ago, 3,600 years ago, but we feel their presence in every Jewish home, in all of Jewish life. People like Moses, Aaron, King David. I was saying a while ago, I was saying the Psalms of King David, poems that were written 3,000 years ago. Incredible. We feel close to personalities like Rabbi Akiva, who was murdered by the Romans around 1900 years ago, 1800 years ago. We feel close to Rashi, one of the seminal greatest scholars of the Jewish world. Every Jew learns Chumash with Rashi, or Talmud Gemara with Rashi. Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, the 11th century great French scholar, biblical commentator, leader, and one of the greatest, most important, if not the greatest commentator on the Tanakh and on the Talmud. And to so many others. But certainly, one of the unique figures in Jewish history, who arguably is one of the people who influenced, one of the greatest influences on the Jewish people, not only in his day, but for generations afterwards till this very day. And certainly one of the top halachic authorities on Jewish law, remains the Rambam. Rabbeinu Rambam is an acronym for those who don't know. Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon, Moses the son of Maimon, or the way the world calls him, Maimonides. Who was this man? What did he accomplish? Why are we learning his works tonight? And why are we celebrating the completion of the works of Maimonides? And what's the relevance to a Jew living in Wisconsin during a coronavirus in July 2020? Maimonides was born in the year 1135, approximately. You know, they didn't hold records like they hold today. Some argue 1138, but we'll keep it 1135 for simplicity purposes. But those of you who are going to feel it's not 1135, it's 1138. We know of Rabbi Kapach's opinion that Rambam was born 1138. 1135 is his birth, or approximately 1135, in Cordova, in the southern city of Cordova in Spain, of course. His father is Maimonides. He's a judge in the city. His mother dies when he's a young child. Maimonides grows up in this very Jewish city of Cordova, learning at the feet of his father and of some great masters and teachers. But his world crumbles and falls apart at the age of Bar Mitzvah. When the Rambam is around 13 years old, 13 years of age, one of the most fanatical sects in the Islamic world, known as the Almohads, conquer Cordova. The Almohads had a vision. Their leader had a dream. And that is, no more can Islam reside with people who believe in another religion. That era is over. That can happen for the first 500 years of Islam. But now, the Prophet Muhammad and God have a new vision for humanity. Either you embrace Islam or you face death. Their aggression, the violence, the bloodshed was horrific. And any city that they conquered, all the Jews were given that choice. You convert or you die. This shattered the heart of the sensitive and deeply caring Maimonides. A 13-year-old boy was forced together with his family to escape. And they fled. They had to hide fled the Atlas Mountains. They fled to North Africa. They lived in caves. They settled in Fez, Morocco, in the city of Fez in Morocco. The Almohads came there too. They had to flee once again. They fled to Egyptian Alexandria, the Alexandria in Egypt. They fled to the Holy Land. Ultimately, Rambam settles in Fustat, Egypt, which is ancient Cairo. And that's where he would remain until his passing in December 1204, at the age of 69. The Rambam was born Erev Pesach, the day before Passover, 1135, and he passed away at the age of 69, almost 70, in December, the 20th day of Tavis, 1204. Some years ago, I was privileged. God gave my wife and I a special gift, a boy who was born on the 20th of Tavis, the 20th day of the Hebrew month of Tavis. So we gave one of his names, was Moshe, Moses, to name him after this great personality, the Rambam, whose name was Moshe. Now, when Maimonides fled at the age of 23, on the run, he started to write a commentary on one of the most important works of Judaism. In fact, it remains in the oral tradition of Judaism after the Bible, the most important work. It's called the Mishnah. The Mishnah, which was authored by Rabbi Judah the Prince in the 2nd and 3rd century after the Common Era, compiled all of the laws of Judaism that were transmitted through the oral tradition until his day, from Moses until his day. But the Mishnah, which was written in the 2nd century or 3rd century, is beautiful, but very concise, very brief, and needs explanation and elucidation. So Maimonides worked on 10 years, from the age of 23 to 33. And he wrote one of the most important commentaries on the Mishnah, and he wrote it in Arabic, which was the language that so many Jews spoke at that time in the 12th century, so that everybody would understand it. As the Rambam's life progressed, his writing increased. This man was not just a great genius, but also a prolific writer. As time goes on, he authors so many works in Jewish law, Jewish theology, Jewish philosophy, Talmud, and medicine. The Rambam wrote approximately 18 works on medicine in the 12th century, including anatomy, pharmacology, dermatology, and so many other elements of biology and medicine in the 12th century. He was the quintessential Renaissance man, a person who in his mind and heart literally embraced everything that the human brain, and he was a gifted brain, can embrace in God's world. The Rambam was interested in everybody and everything. His eagerness and inquisitiveness and yearning for knowledge, for wisdom, for truth knew no bounds. You see it in his works. But what made him uniquely exceptional was that his heart matched his brain. Usually, people who have great intellectual caliber, you'll see, they're not usually the great lovers and emotional people because they're scholastic, they're philosophical. There are people who are very emotional, but that's a different style. Few are the individuals in history whose brain literally is gigantic, and yet their heart, their emotions, their feelings, their sense of empathy, compassion, and caring for their people, not only for their families, but for their people and for the world, for humanity, really matches it. It's one of really the great features that I always marveled on the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Lubavitcher Rebbe had that very unique combination. He was really a scholar par excellence. I don't think he ever planned to be a Rebbe. He once wrote to somebody that I saw a letter he wrote in 1949 to a rabbi in Israel, the rabbi of Bnei Brak, Rabbi Yankel Landau. He says, I remember you from the 20s. You always had a skill in public activism. He says, I never did. He says, not then and not now. I never had a skill for public leadership and activism. I thought to myself, somebody who didn't have a skill, he didn't do so bad. The Rebbe really was a scholarly type, very introverted, a loner in the sense that he did not need to socialize. He wasn't a schmoozer. He was just not that type. He lived in the cocoon of holiness and spirituality and Torah and wisdom, learning day and night for decades and decades. Until he became a Rebbe, most people didn't even know him. And even years later, I remember I was a child and I would watch him walk home Friday night, Shabbos. He would walk himself with a certain simplicity that was very, very interesting to watch. The regular fanfare and drama, of a leader, it didn't really apply to him. On the other hand, the Rebbe's heart matched his mind. A real lover, a lover of humanity and a lover of the Jewish people. So already close to 1,000 years ago in the Rambam, we saw that incredible combination. You see it especially in the letters. There's many letters that he wrote. The passion, the caring, the empathy, the concern. It's a synthesis that is very unique. Tragedy struck Maimonides. He was a pretty young man, and in a span of 2 years, he lost his father, his wife, and his children. He was alone in the world. He was supported by his brother. He had a brother, Reb David, who was a diamond merchant, and he would travel to India back to Egypt, and he single-handedly supported Maimonides and his family when they were alive, so that Rambam could sit and learn and study and write and teach and mentor. And then, around 1171, tragedy struck again. Just a little while later after the first tragedy in which the Rambam's family died, his father, his wife, his children, his brother drowned in a shipwreck. And now, the Rambam, first of all, had no way to support himself. He now lost his beloved brother who took care of him all these years, and his brother left a family, a wife and children, without any support. That's when Maimonides decided to do what a good Jewish boy does. What does a good Jewish boy do? In Wisconsin, what does a good Jewish boy do? You become a doctor, right? So after Maimonides was one of the greatest scholars in the Jewish world, he finally fulfilled the dream of a Yiddish mama. He became a doctor. He didn't just become a doctor. He was hired by Saladin. Saladin was the sultan, legendary sultan of Egypt and Turkey, and one of the great prides of the ancient world of Islam, 12th century Saladin. And the Rambam was recognized for his brilliance and his humanity and his sensitivity, and of course his skill as a physician. So he became the chief doctor in the palace, in the royal home of Saladin and his son and the whole family, which of course gave him a very good basis for support. He could support himself, he could support his family. Later the Rambam would remarry and have another son who would survive him, a son named Abraham, Rabbeinu Avraham. He's known as Rabbeinu Avraham ben Harambam. Avraham was the son of the Rambam, who was also a student of the Rambam, and who wrote works of his own. So the Rambam did leave a child, Rabbeinu Avraham ben Harambam, even though his first children, as I mentioned, passed away. He was a person who suffered, and he writes about it. His grief he displays in his letters very, very openly. You could see he was in touch with his emotions. They were not repressed. And you could learn from him what it means to live life in an upbeat and joyous way, despite circumstances. It's one of the greatest lessons for Maimonides, because if you read the biography of his life, you see what he went through. He went through a lot, and it got to him. He was not a detached scholar who was like a robot and you couldn't get to him. It really got to him. It penetrated him. The Rambam knew how to cry, how to feel pain. And the Rambam writes about his depression and his melancholy very, very openly, very vulnerable, actually unique to see a rabbi of such stature being so vulnerable. But it only makes you love him so much more because you could connect to him. You feel his heart. You feel the pulse in his heart. And even though his writings are so organized and scholastic, and he is the philosopher par excellence and the systemizer par excellence, the heart and the emotions just come out constantly. My late father told me that he heard from the Lubavitcher Rebbe that you see in all the works of the Rambam a combination of a Baal Moichin, a brilliant genius, but also a Baal Hispilus, somebody who is so emotional, and a Baal Bechi, somebody who's in touch with the emotion and the pain of humanity. He said even in his works of halacha, in his works of law, sometimes the Rambam almost can't help himself, and there's an outburst of emotion, even though it's very contained and compressed in a very rigorous Talmudic, analytical, and systematic way of writing. That ability of the Rambam to be able to maintain a quality of life and the ability to rise up from very profound challenges and realize who he is in the world and that he must maximize his potential remains a timeless inspiration to the Jewish people. In fact, later on, approximately in the year 1170, shortly after the tragedies that befell him, the Rambam began and undertook his most monumental task. And it's interesting. In the secular world, there's a lot of research on Maimonides. This element is not so known, but in the Jewish world, especially in the Jewish world of people who are immersed in Torah, this remains one of the greatest, most important legacy of the Rambam. He decided to systemize for the first time in Jewish history, Jewish law. Now, it sounds simple, systemize Jewish law, right? You go onto the internet, and any question you have on Jewish law, something will come up. There's plenty of websites and books and seminars and workshops, and you can go to your local rabbis, and you want to learn a systematic presentation of Jewish law. Doesn't seem so complicated. But if you understand the Jewish world and Jewish texts in the 12th century, till today you marvel at how a single human being of flesh and blood, a mortal person, can accomplish what the Rambam accomplished. Not only in terms of the quantity of his works, but the quality of his works, the originality, the innovation, the structure, the organization, the clarity, the depth, and the holistic mastery of literally every subject and bringing it together remains, they say the seven wonders, this remains one of the great wonders of a human mind and a human soul. You see, till that point, where did you find the sources of Jewish law? Jewish law is not so simple. There are 613 mitzvahs in the Bible, in the Torah. But each one of these mitzvahs has so many nuances, details, intricacies, and so many questions that arrive with different circumstances. Where is it all to be found? And the answer, of course, is you have the Bible, the Tanakh, and then you have the Mishnah, and then you have the Talmud, and then you have a few other works that were composed around the time of the Talmud, a little earlier, like Mishnah, Braise, Tosefta, Mechilta, Sifra, Sifri, Medrashim. I'm just mentioning some of the names. The Jerusalem Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, one challenge, nothing is organized. There's no systemized way. In one tractate, you can have hundreds of laws of different subjects, and nothing is systematic or organized. Plus, the language is difficult, and it's mixed in to deep, this heavy analysis and rigorous debates disputations, arguments, questions, answers, refutations, ibayas, tiyuftas. It's so complex that it's almost impossible for most people, besides the great scholar, to be able to find, bottom line, what is Jewish law. And there's no text to even begin. Where do we begin? And Rambam used his mind, mastered all of the texts of Judaism that were available till his day, but didn't only master them, he learned them and relearned them and remembered them. He captured this bird's eye view of seeing everything in the most unified way. And he decided for the first time in history, in the 12th century. Now this is quite remote in Jewish history. Rambam lived 1,000 years after the destruction of the Second Temple. The Second Temple was destroyed around 1,500 years after Moses. So we're talking about almost 2,500 years from the beginning of Jewish history, from the Exodus of Egypt. And Maimonides decides after 2,500 years, it's time to organize things. So he says we need to put together all of Jewish law in one work. He calls that work Mishnah Torah, which means the second to Torah. It's that compilation of work, of laws, that now is the complement. It complements the Torah. You read the Torah, the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible, Torah Shebeksav, 5 books of Moses, the prophets and the writing. Then he says, and you read this work. And in terms of Jewish law, you don't need any other book, as he puts it in the introduction. This is where God's sense of humor comes in. Maimonides, his ambition was to write a work of Jewish law, and he says in the introduction, you shouldn't need any other work. You just read the Tanakh and you have my work and you're done. So what does God do in a sense of humor? I don't know if there's a single work in Judaism that triggered and invited so many other works and commentaries like the work of Maimonides. The man who said, after this, you won't need any other work. That work became a catalyst and a springboard, not for dozens and not for hundreds, but for thousands of works that are based in one way or another on the works of Maimonides, trying to figure out every word, every nuance, every syllable in the Rambam's work. He divides Jewish law into 14 categories. And I'm going to share with you the names, just the names, where they came up with these names. But all of Jewish law, he categorized into 14 categories. I'll say them in Hebrew and then I'll translate. It's a free translation. Mada ahava zmanim, noshim kedusha hafla, zroyim avoida karbonis, tara nezik, kinyan mishpatim shayftim. These are the 14 books of the Rambam's great magnum opus of Jewish law. The first one is named Mada, which means knowledge. For the Rambam, this book will contain what are the most important things that a Jew needs to know. Not bad, huh? What are the most important things you have to know in life? The next book is called Love, Ahava, love. The next book is called Times. It goes through the calendar, the Jewish calendar. Laws of Shabbos, laws of holidays, laws of Hanukkah, laws of Purim, laws of Shofar, laws of Sukkah. The next book is called Women. This is the book that's dedicated to relationships, marriage, divorce, levirate marriages, the laws of betrothal, etc. Married life. The next book is called Sanctity, Kedusha. The next book is called Hafla'ah, which deals with human vows. The next book is called, not Hafla'ah, Agriculture, all the agricultural laws. Next book is Service, all the laws connected to service in the sanctuary and building the sanctuary. And then there's the book of sacrifices, offerings. Next book is called Purity, all the laws connected to ritual, purity and impurity. The next book is called Damages. The next, Acquisition. And the next, Civil Justice. And the final one is Judges, Leadership. Here you have 14 books. Each one has a name, one word, not a sentence, one word. And in these 14, Maimonides managed to categorize every single law that exists within Jewish life from the days of Moses until his day. Which means the 630 mitzvahs, with all of their details, with all of their nuances and intricacies, including all of the rabbinic institutions over the generations till the days of the Rambam, 12th century. Within those 14 works, he put 83 sections. 83 sections which capture all of the laws of Judaism, and something unique. There are many works of Jewish law today, but the only one that includes all the laws, including the laws in the times of the temple, which don't apply now, the laws that are relevant when Mashiach comes, is in the work of the Maimonides. He wanted it should be a holistic picture of all of Judaism in its most idealistic state, pre-exile, pre-destruction of temple, post-Messianic redemption, a full picture. When you learn Rambam from beginning to end, and you learn it well, you become aware of every single aspect of Jewish law. There's not a single detail missing. No, he didn't include all the debates and all the questions and all the opinions and all the refutations and all the sources. That he did not do. He gave you the final verdict, and he was criticized for that. That itself created a very interesting debate, which is why his book created so many more books, because of all the debates. What are your sources, and what about the other opinions, and who says your opinion is right, and you gave a verdict, but maybe the verdict should have been like the other sage. The Rambam brought, everything was summarized, what's the final verdict. But there's no detail that's excluded there. And what he had to do for this is, first of all, create a system of Jewish law, put everything in its right context, divide it into sections and then into chapters, and build it. And everything is organized in the most thoughtful, comprehensive way. Till today, I read the Rambam, I've learned Rambam many times, and I marvel how this person who was only using his mind and the text that he had, he didn't have any external search engine. He didn't have a supercomputer. He didn't even have Google, believe it or not. Could you believe that? But internally, his mastery and organization is one you could still learn from today. I'm a writer, I'm a communicator. And I read the Rambam and I really say, wow, look how a person thinks through a subject, look how they articulate it, and look how they organize it. There's a very famous expression of Reb Chaim Brisker. Fascinating. And I'll tell you the story, and I know this is a little bit of an analytical Talmudic story, so maybe for beginners it's going to be a little complicated, but I think it's worth for you to be attentive to this story because it gives you a little taste of how Jewish scholarship works. I read this story in a work by one of the great sages of Jerusalem. He passed away in 78, Rabbi Shlomo Yosef Zev, and he's the editor of the Talmudic Encyclopedia. Great scholar and a prolific writer, Rav Zevin, and he shares this story. Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, who's also known as Reb Chaim Brisker, he was Rosh Hashiva of Volozhin, later the great rabbi of Brisk, city of Lithuania. He was the city also where Menachem Begin came from, Brisk. It was a very interesting city, and the Soloveitchik family, his father was in Brisk, and then he was in Brisk, and his son was in Brisk. Reb Chaim Brisker was not only a genius, he also had a big heart, but he was considered one of the greatest experts in Rambam. And he not only studied Maimonides, but he understood that the Rambam is the greatest definer in the history of Judaism, which means his choice of words can teach you how to define every law. And here's a story. He's sitting in his home, teaching a few close students. They're learning Torah. He's giving a class. Suddenly, a family comes into the house, they knock on the door, Reb Chaim allows them to come in, Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, they come in, and they tell him a story, and they're lamenting. Here's the story. A relative of theirs died. It was the father of the family or somebody else died. After that, somebody else died in the city. Their father was a simple man, poor, no elaborate means, very simple man. After his death, died another man who was affluent, prestigious, wealthy, very respectable figure. The Chevra Kaddish in every community, there's the burial society that takes care of all the people who passed away, unfortunately, to make sure that they get everything they need in order to be buried and interred according to Jewish law. So this family comes to Reb Chaim and says, the burial society ignored our father, who died first, and they're first tending to the second person who died later, taking care of him, taking care of the funeral. And we came to them and we said, Our father died first. You have to take care of him first. That's how it goes. It goes in the order of the people who died. And you skipped him and you went to somebody else. And it's all money, 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 money. You know how it is, right? Money, money. It's all money. They're telling Reb Chaim, you're the rabbi of the city. You've got to stop this. Wow. Okay, it's the fate of a rabbi. What do you do? What would you do? Reb Chaim Soloveitchik listens attentively. He stands up. And he goes over to the bookcase and he takes out a Rambam, the work of Maimonides, written in the 12th century. Reb Chaim Brisker lived in the late 1800s and the early 1900s. He passed away in August 1918. Chaf Aleph of Tafresh Ayin Ches. He was one of the closest. Him and the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe were two of the great leaders of Russian Jewry during the last era of Tsar Nicholas II, the Romanov dynasty, which would soon end with the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 in the middle of the First World War. But this is the last era of the Tsar, and him and the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Reb Shalom Ber, who passed away 100 years ago, 1920 in Rostov, 2 years after Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, were very, very close, really, really close. So Reb Chaim Soloveitchik stands up. He takes out a Rambam and he looks up the laws of mourning, Hilchis Avil, which is at the end of the Maimonides, the last book of the 14 books, the book of leadership, Judges. He looks up the laws of mourning, of grief, and he flips through the pages, page after page after page after page. And then Reb Chaim turns to the family and he says, I will take care of it, but it's really not an issue that's related to you. In other words, this is not your concern. You really don't have to worry about it. This is not something that's pertinent to you. This is really not your business or issue. I will take care of it, and I will tell them not to skip over your father and to do his funeral first. But this is not something that you guys should be complaining about. But I'll take care of it. It's fine. And he wishes them well, and they leave the house. The students turned to him. They said, Rabbi, what did you tell them? I don't understand. Are they right or are they wrong? If they're right, why do you tell them it's not their business? They're right. It's their father. And if they're wrong, why do you say you're going to take care of it? Were you just trying to placate them? Reb Chaim wasn't that type of person. He was a very honest and truthful person, to say the least. So Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, in a classic Talmudic mind, said, I'll explain it to you. Now you have to tune in, guys. Reb Chaim said as follows. There is a law in Judaism that if somebody dies first and then somebody dies after that person, you have to first tend to the person who passed away first. But I was not sure what's the basis and the reason for the law. It could be one of two reasons. One is because of kavod hames, honor of a person who died. Judaism is very sensitive to the honor of a corpse. We don't treat a corpse as just a corpse. A corpse is to be honored because this is a holy body which housed the image of God inside of it. And therefore, we are very sensitive and respectful to a body. So if somebody dies, you have to tend to it first. If somebody dies afterwards, he goes second. It's a way of making sure you show honor to the person who's dead. Or maybe the reason is something else. We have a law, ein ma'avirin ala mitzvahs, which means when you have an opportunity to do one mitzvah, you don't overpass it to do another mitzvah. You first do this mitzvah and then you do the other mitzvah. This is a very important law in Judaism. I don't skip one mitzvah to do another mitzvah. You don't overpass a mitzvah. Perhaps when somebody dies, there's a mitzvah to bury them. It's one of the mitzvahs. So you don't overpass it to go to somebody else who died later. I was not sure which logic is the one that dictates this law. What's the difference? If it's about honoring the person who died, then the family has to protest because it's the honor of their father who's deceased. But if it's about not overpassing a mitzvah, then it doesn't have to do with this particular issue of mourning of the person who died. This is a law in all of Judaism. You don't overpass a mitzvah. That's why if I have, for example, tefillin in front of a talus, so the mitzvah of tefillin is right there. I shouldn't overpass it to put on the talus first. That's why you're supposed to, we put on the talus before the tefillin. So the talus should be in front of the tefillin. So you shouldn't have to overpass one mitzvah to do another mitzvah. It doesn't have to do with death or funerals. I wasn't sure which one is the basis for this law. So how do you figure it out? I opened up a Rambam, the laws of mourning. to see if the Rambam puts in over there the law that if somebody dies before somebody else, you have to take care of him first. And I saw that he doesn't put it in. This means he doesn't believe that it's a specific law that's connected to death and mourning, because if yes, he would have put it into those laws. It means the Rambam holds it's part of the general principle in all of Judaism that you don't overpass a mitzvah. It's not a law that's particularly applicable to the laws of grief and death, and that's why he doesn't put it in there. So I told them, I'll take care of it because I'm a rabbi and I'm responsible for everything that goes on in this city. But this family, it's nothing to do with them. It doesn't have to do with the honor of the person who died. It has to do with the burial society. Is not allowed to overpass a mitzvah. This is my responsibility as a rabbi, but it has nothing to do with the family because it's not a halacha that's relevant to the issue of death. In other words, Reb Chaim Soloveitchik understood that from the Rambam, you could not only learn from what he says, you can also derive clarity from what he doesn't say. From that which he leaves out, from the blanks, from that which he emits, from the absence of the Rambam, from the empty space, you can also learn laws. That's the master organizer, the master systemizer. That's what he did for Jewish law. And based on this, a new era of Jewish scholarship began, because now everybody had the works of the Rambam to learn how to structure Jewish law, whether they agreed with him or they didn't agree with him. He was that person who set Jewish scholarship on a new course. Even if you disagreed with him, but you had to disagree with him. In other words, the Rambam became such a powerful figure until today. Every respectable teacher, Rosh Yeshiva, Rosh Kollel, Avrech, every serious Ben Torah, when you finish studying something in the Talmud, you go and you look how the Rambam defines this law. You study it, you analyze it, you figure out exactly what he was saying, because he really managed to get to the soul and to capture it. But this wasn't only Jewish law. Jewish philosophy was also fragmented all over the place. There was no organized Jewish theology. The Rambam was the first one to create a system of what do we believe in as Jews. Now it's hard to say, today to speculate. What is the 13 Ani Mamins? Many Jews, many of you say it. Every day you say 13 statements of Ani Mamin. I believe. These are called the 13 principles of faith. This comes from the Rambam. The Rambam, who wrote an introduction to the 11th chapter of Sanhedrin, Perek Chelek, he also systemized Jewish faith, and they argued with him about that too. Rabbi Yosef Albo from Spain, 14th century, 15th century, he held it's not 13, it's 3. But he had to argue with Maimonides. Again, the Rambam became the person to argue with. But he decided he wanted to create a system. Jews should know, what do we believe in as Jews? And why do we believe in it? And where did we get this from? And how did it develop? And what's the basis of it? The Rambam wanted that every Jew should be a master of understanding what is Judaism, why we believe what we believe, how it developed, what is it that constitutes Jewish faith, Jewish heritage, and have a clear mastery of every single law that God gave Moses to communicate to the Jewish people. The Rambam also wanted to systemize Jewish ethics. He wrote a book called Shmoina Prakim, an introduction to ethics of the fathers, giving Jews an approach to the life of ethics, self-refinement, personal work of transformation, spiritual work. And towards the end of his life, he wrote a book called The Guide for the Perplexed. This is a generation where so many Jews were perplexed then, as they're still perplexed today. And he wrote this authoritative, incredibly deep philosophical work, trying to show, using some of the premises and ideas of Greek philosophy, which has saturated much of Jewish youth and much of the Jewish world and Jewish scholarship at the time, using their principles to show the authenticity of Jewish faith, using philosophical principles to explain and give an approach to Judaism, and most importantly, dealing with the great questions, challenges, dilemmas, and struggles that a thinking Jew may experience when he or she starts asking questions. What does it mean to be a Jew? And what does it mean to live a Jewish life? And what is the role of Torah in my life? For this, he wrote this grand, very complex, and very profound work, known as Moreh Nevuchim, in Arabic, the Guide to the Perplexed. Well, his works were translated into Hebrew, but the only work that he wrote in Hebrew was the Mishnah Torah, the great magnum opus, the 14 works, the 14 books of Judaism. This is the one work that Maimonides wrote in the original Hebrew. Everything else he wrote in Arabic. Now, Maimonides was also a great leader. You have people who are thinkers, but they're not leaders. You have people who are great legal authorities, but they're not philosophers. You have people who are great physicians, but they're not leaders, and so forth. To have a person who was an extraordinary leader, wrote letters to Jewish communities from the whole world and fought for them. A person who was a personal mentor, a teacher, a rabbi, a sage, a philosopher, a physician, a healer, a deep ethical thinker and commentator, and somebody who could bring it all together. This was the personality of Maimonides, and that's why his impact is still felt today. His works are studied with attentiveness, with seriousness, because we see here the imprint not just of his own mind, but the collective mind of Jewish scholarship and Jewish history that he embodied, and with incredible humility and with incredible love and empathy towards his people, towards his history, towards humanity, towards the world, and towards all of the Jewish people before him and after him, and of course towards God himself. One of the very extraordinary moments of the Rambam's care and concern comes out in one of his letters, and it's worth to tell the story. It's a fascinating chapter in history. The Jews of Morocco were run down by the Almohads I mentioned earlier. Almohad is a combination of two words. You hear the words? Elohim Ahad. Almohad. God is one. These were Islamist monotheists who in their zeal for the oneness of God could kill every Jew who doesn't convert to Islam. And North African Jewry was ultimately taken by them, Morocco, and Jews had to face the choice of death or expulsion or conversion to Islam. This is, of course, years before the Inquisition in Spain, which would result in the expulsion of 1492 by Isabella and Ferdinand in Spain, and Turcomedes, Yamach Shemoy, who ran the Inquisition. But that's the Christian fanatics in Spain. Here we're talking about the Muslims, the Almohads, in the 1100s, in the generation of Maimonides. And many of the Jews of Morocco converted to Islam. And they practiced Judaism clandestinely. The Almohads demanded a Jew should verbally declare God is true and his prophet is Muhammad. And then you were off the hook. There was a rabbi, a well-known rabbi, who wrote a scathing letter to the Jews of Morocco, accusing them of surrendering to idolatry and idol worship, and saying to them that all the mitzvahs that they do secretly and all their prayers are worthless and valueless because they are idol worshippers, and God will not reward them for any mitzvah that they did because they are people who completely betrayed God and the Jewish people. The Rambam saw this, and the Rambam's blood boiled. Oy, did he write a letter. This letter known as Igeres Hashmad, the letter about conversion, is a timeless classic in the history of Jewish leadership. First of all, it's elaborate. It's filled with sources. It's sharp. It's loaded. At some point, at some moments, the Rambam gets pretty personal, defending the people of God. He makes many incredible points there. One of the most important points is that Islam is not considered idolatry because it's a monotheistic faith that believes in one God, and therefore the Jew is not obligated to die rather than to make this false declaration that God's prophet is Muhammad. And even though it would have been a Jew could die and it'd be better if he leaves and settles somewhere else, but you cannot call these Jews idol worshippers. They did it under coercion, and the Rambam is so empathetic to their plight. And he celebrates their life, and he celebrates every mitzvah that they do clandestinely, and every prayer that they hold in their own homes, even though they had to show up in the open as official Muslims. But the Rambam encourages them and inspires them. And the Rambam goes on a tirade against Jewish leaders who don't understand that if you don't love your people, do not rebuke them. You can only rebuke people if you love them. And he goes through a list. He speaks about Moshe, and he speaks about Elijah, and he speaks about Isaiah, and he proves how every one of them, when they spoke negatively about God's children, the penalties were severe. Moshe his hand suffers leprosy, and Isaiah Hanavi gets burnt with coal on his lip, and Eliyahu Hanavi gets severely penalized and chastised for it because he says that the Jews abandoned God's covenant. And he goes through a list, and the Rambam says, if the greatest of the great who spoke of God's children in a negative way were penalized this way, what about light-headed people who don't even appreciate the depth of Judaism when they open their mouth? He said, Oy Gewalt, he said, a person like this man should have never opened his mouth, and he certainly should have not taken a pen and wrote anything down. And he says there's something very special. He says that even Yeravam ben Nevat, do you know Yeravam ben Nevat? Yeravam ben Nevat is considered one of the most quintessential sinners in the Jewish world. Yeravam ben Nevat was the man who succeeded after Solomon died and Rechavam took over. The Jewish kingdom split between the southern and northern kingdom. And Yeravam ben Nevat became the competing king, the king of the north, competing with the king of the south, which created a split in the Jewish world, literally a split, 10 tribes versus 2 tribes. He was called Yeravam, the son of Nevat. It says in the ethics of the fathers, Chata v'hechtias harabim. He sinned and he made everybody else sin because he was a man who was a great Torah scholar, and he created 2 golden calves in Dan and Bet El for Jews to worship as a way of taking them away from Jerusalem and the sanctuary and the Beis HaMikdash. This was Yeravam ben Nevat. So Yeravam ben Nevat is considered one of the greatest troublemakers in the history of Judaism. Says the Rambam, I want you to know, Yeravam ben Nevat is going to get punished not only for all of the catastrophic sins that he brought upon the Jewish people and the demoralization and alienation of Judaism and the addiction to idolatry and paganism with all of its barbaric rites. He's also, with all of its barbaric routines and customs, he's also going to be punished for cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos without making an Erev Tavshilin. There's a law that on the holidays we're allowed to cook food in order to eat on that day, but I'm not allowed to cook for another day. What if it's Friday and I want to cook for Shabbos? I'm not allowed to because it's the holiday, it's a holy day. I could cook to eat on Friday, but I can't cook on Friday to eat for Shabbos. But the rabbis instituted something called an Erev Tavshilin, very interesting halachic process through which you could cook extra food on Friday that you're going to eat for Friday night or for Shabbos day. This is a rabbinic law, says Maimonides. Yeravam ben Nevat will be punished not only for creating golden calves in Dan and Bet El and introducing the Jewish world to pagan idolatry, also for cooking an egg or cooking a piece of gefilte fish or baking a cake on Friday afternoon, Yom Tov, for Shabbos, even if it's a rabbinic prohibition. The Rambam says every single mitzvah and every single sin a person does is significant. So once, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he was completing, he made a siyum on tractate Sukkah. It was the yahrzeit of his mother on the 6th of Tishrei, 1974. And the Rebbe said that when you read these words of the Rambam, it seems like he's saying something very novel. But why is he saying something novel? Just because he's a big sinner, he shouldn't be punished for cooking on Yom Tov for Shabbos without making an Erev Tavshilin. If I cook on Yom Tov for Shabbos, I do get punished. Just because he's a sinner, so he's allowed to get away with murder. He used then the expression of the Talmud. Just because there's garlic all over me and I'm smell, therefore I'm allowed to put more garlic and smell even more. Just because I did 100 sins, therefore I should get away with it and do another sin. Come on. Just because he's such a bad guy, therefore he's allowed to sin. That's not fair. Come on. What's the chiddush? What's the novelty of the Rambam? The Lubavitcher Rebbe explained the words of the Rambam in the most profound and beautiful way, and he said as follows. The prophet Amos says, Ki rak eschem yadati mikol mishpachos ha'adama, al kein efked aleichem es avinesechem. God says, I love you in a special way from all the nations of the world, and therefore your sins matter so much. When your child betrays you, it's very different than when somebody else's child betrays you because of the relationship. When your husband says something insulting or your wife says something insulting to you, the pain, the turmoil, the agony is far profounder than if a stranger says the same insulting comment. Why? Because a stranger doesn't have such an impact on me. We don't have such a close relationship. But when we have such a close relationship, your words matter to me. Your actions mean something to me. When you say something or you don't say something, what you do and you don't do, it affects me in a very, very real way. The way my child communicates with me, the way my child behaves, causes me either tranquil nights or sleepless nights. And parents here of teenagers know what I'm talking about. And the way my husband or wife speaks to me either creates a beautiful, loving ambiance in the home or a very difficult ambiance in the home. You can't say, oh, well, who cares? We're too close to make believe that it doesn't mean anything. Says the prophet Amos, God tells the Jewish people, my love to you is infinite. My love to you is so profound, and therefore every sin that you do touches me. It affects me in the deepest way because we're so close, we're so powerful. Yes, I am vulnerable. I am vulnerable in your presence because we have developed, God chose this relationship, and this relationship is so powerful. You mean too much to me to make believe that what you do or you don't do is meaningless and valueless. That's the secret when you read in the Tanakh. God says, if you do this, if you don't do this, if you do this, you don't do this, chill out. What are you so uptight about? But the depth of it really is that you matter. You create a cataclysmic impact. Every thought, every word, every deed has indispensable value and has an impact on the past, on the present, on the future, on history, on the world, not only on yourself, and on God himself. So the whole idea of reward, of punishment, that the Torah takes our actions so seriously, even minute and insignificant actions, where does this come from? Like, who cares? And the answer is, when you're the president of the United States of America, you can't say that your words don't matter, your actions don't matter. Too many people and too many lives depend on it. You can't just say, I'm going into isolation for a few months. Who cares? You are too significant to make believe that your words don't mean anything. This is the basis of Judaism. God says your thoughts matter, your words matter, and your actions are of supreme significance. Now you would think, what happens if you get severed? Your sins don't matter anymore. Your Rambam ben Avot became such a sinner, you would think God disowned him. You're not my child anymore. If you're not my child, go do whatever you want. I don't care. If we're not connected anymore, you're not going to affect me. Go do whatever you want. Jump in the lake or jump over the Brooklyn Bridge or whatever the bridge by you guys. What does it bother me? We're not connected anymore. This is what the Rambam is saying. Wo abgeschnitten, wenn abgeschnitten. Your Rambam ben Avot, even when he cooks gefilte fish on Yom Tov, without making an Erev Tavshilin, it's a stab in God's chest, so to speak. It hurts. It's painful. You know why? Because a Jew is a Jew is a Jew. There's no such a thing that a Jew is cut off. The Jew may be a Jew who chose a wrong path. The Jew may have made errors. The Jew may have transgressed. And he may be a Yeravam ben Avot who is considered somebody who did it with willingness, not coerced, with willingness, with conscientiousness. He knew what he was doing, and still, he can't be cut off. Bein kach or bein kach atem kriyim bonim is an expression of Reb Meir in Talmud Kedushin 36b. You're always my child. And the love to a child is unconditional. It doesn't mean it's uncritical. I may disagree with what my child does. I may be pained by what my child does. But I can't cut myself off for my child. That option does not exist with a functional and a healthy mommy and tati. On the contrary, because I love you so much, the pain is more acute. The pain is much deeper. But still, the pain of cutting off your child, of cutting your child out of your life, I can tell you, my friends, is more painful than any pain your child will cause you. It's one of the greatest mistakes that some parents make because of choices that their children make. They cut the cord. They sever the relation between them and their children. And there's only one reason. They don't want to feel so much pain. If you're out of my life, if I reject you, if I throw you out of my house and I throw you out of my mind, I throw you out of my life, maybe I'll be more tranquil. But there's no such a thing. There's no such a thing, because you and your child are essentially one. We are called Bonim Atem Lashem Elekechem. God says, you're my child. And the relationship between a child and a parent is non-negotiable. It's unconditional. It's absolute, even if it goes through painful moments. Because it's not something I choose and therefore I can unchoose. It's part of who I am. It's the fabric of, it's part of my DNA. It's part of my essence. The Jew is divine. Ayid, says the Tanya, is a chelik elikam imal mamish. A Jew is a piece of God. A Jew is a manifestation of the divine in this world. That is who I am. It's not something I can change. I'm an atheist, I'm an agnostic, I'm a sinner, I'm reform, I'm conservative, I'm conservadox, I'm orthodox, I'm right-wing, I'm left-wing, I'm fundamentalist orthodox, I'm ultra-orthodox, I'm Hasidic, I'm neo-Hasidic, I'm completely left-wing, reconstructionist, liberal, humanistic, Habura, renewal, Bagel and Lax Jew. Okay, we can discuss it, we can explore it, we can debate it. But ask Adolf Hitler. Who did he send into the gas chambers? Ask Joseph Mengele. He didn't care what type of hat you wore. He didn't even care what you believed in. If you had Jewish blood flowing through your sinews, they felt that you had to be exterminated because somehow the holiness of God is manifested in every single Jew. That's what the Rebbe said Maimonides is teaching. Yeravim ben Nevat, the sinner of sinners, when he cooks on Yom Tov without making an Erev Tavshilin, God says, it hurts. He's part of my family. He's my child. And the fact that he violates Yom Tov, there's a sacred Hakdusha there. There's a holiness that's in the world. And when your son violates that holiness, it hurts. And the punishment in Judaism is simply a consequence of the negative energy that is created with an act that represents disharmony with the divine cosmic blueprint and heartbeat of creation. I hope you understand what I just said. That's why the Rambam says, never underestimate even a Jew who did so many sins. Every mitzvah is precious. And every time you can save him from doing the antithesis of a mitzvah, it's extremely precious. These types of ideas of the Rambam are not just relevant. They represent the zeitgeist of Judaism, the essence of the Jewish soul. At last, I conclude with this final point. We just heard from Rabbi Samuels the final law with which the Rambam concludes his magnum opus, the Mishnah Torah. And what is that law? He speaks about the days of redemption. And he says, in that time there will be no hunger, no war, no jealousy, no toxic competitiveness. Goodness will be abundant. All delicacies will be common as dust. We won't have what to fight about, nor will there be hunger. There won't be a void. People won't be starving. They won't have what to fight about. They won't even be jealous of each other. What then is the world going to do? If you don't have socialism, if you don't have capitalism, because you don't need to fight about things and compete about things, and you have everybody has everything what they need, and humanity reaches a point where there's so much prosperity and abundance, I guess we can understand today what the Rambam means, can't we? Right? People are predicting that at some point, not very long, 80% of the workforce will be done by who? By robots. And remember, robots, you want to order pizza, the robot will make the pizza, the robot will pack up the pizza, and the robot will deliver the pizza. 80% of jobs will be done by robots. And remember, robots don't need vacation. Robots don't need a paycheck. And robots don't complain and they don't get exhausted and they could work 7 days a week. And robots also don't have an attitude. So what is everybody else going to do? And if we manage to tap into solar energy, so therefore we won't have to pay for the energy that we pay now, and we manage to create a world without war and without hunger and without coronavirus crippling us. So Maimonides says, what is the world going to do? What are people going to do? And scientists are talking about doubling the lifespan, just as we doubled it in the last century, doubling it again. And they're talking about the fact that people will soon be living 150 years, 160 years, 180 years. And I'm not talking about religious scientists, I'm talking about secular scientists. Now, don't get so happy. Your mother-in-law is also going to live that long. So you're going to retire at 65 and you got 100 years to go. What do you do for 100 years, my friends? You know, scientists are talking today about eternal life. Living 150 years or living homos deus, living forever. You go into the doctor's office and he does a tune-up, yeah? Fresh cells, young cells, you come out and you're 20 years old. A fresh heart, a fresh brain, epigenetics. This is cutting-edge medicine. What are we all going to do? You live to 180, 190, 200 years old. The robot does the work. Things are calm. Was tut man a ganze Tag? So Jews are going to argue. What are they going to argue about? So Maimonides writes this 900 years ago. Unbelievable words. The whole world, all of humanity will be involved in one thing. Divine awareness. And he completes the verse of Isaiah chapter 11. The world will be filled with divine awareness like water covers the sea. And what Maimonides means is that the world is heading towards a time when we will all become aware of the fact that the DNA of our universe is divine energy. Or to quote Max Planck, the father of theoretical physics, of quantum theory, consciousness is not a derivative of matter. Matter is a derivative of consciousness. It's not that there is matter and our consciousness is born from the matter. It's the matter that comes from the consciousness. It's my observation of reality that creates the reality. Which means what makes matter matter is my observation of matter. The moment we all become aware of the divine inner DNA of every single living organism and every single being and every single existing, we will all look at matter and we will see the oneness of God that pervades the whole universe. Ein oid milvada. What is the whole world going to be doing? We're going to be immersed in the absolute harmony and oneness with the divine, identifying ourselves and everyone in our presence as a manifestation of divine energy in the world. So the whole world will become one. There will be absolute harmony. Now, this sounds like abstract language, but this is the language of Judaism, and especially this is the language of Jewish spirituality, of Kabbalah, and specifically of Chassidus, of the works of Hasidism, of Jewish spirituality, but already in Maimonides' works, and he was a philosopher, he wasn't a mystic, at least not in a revealed sense. You have this language. The whole world will become one, and the whole world will be immersed in divine oneness and divine awareness. But it's fascinating because Maimonides also says that today's day and the Messianic times will not experience a quantum leap of miracles. Maimonides says that Mashiach will come and the world will still be governed by natural forces. But how can there be a greater miracle than all of humanity, 7.7 billion people being immersed in divine awareness? And the answer to that, I heard from the Rebbes, because according to Maimonides, this is something we have to do right before Mashiach comes. So that when this happens, when Mashiach comes, it's not going to be such a quantum leap. It's actually going to be a very natural evolution. And you know what? This is the time. This is the time when all of humanity, consciously and subconsciously, is yearning for one thing. They're yearning for the Jewish world to teach them about divine oneness and the oneness of humanity. The coronavirus, which basically transformed every industry and sector in humanity, 7.7 billion people's lives were changed. If you would have told me February, January, that in a few months, every mosque, every church, every synagogue, every school, every stadium, every club, every bar, every mall, every movie theater, every park, every amusement park, and every office will be closed down without a single bullet and without a single bomb and without any declaration of war, I would have told you, you are mad. It's impossible. If you would have told me that a man in Iran and a person in Baghdad and a person in Wuhan and a person in Sydney and a person in Milwaukee or Mequon, Los Angeles and Anchorage, Peru and Sydney, New Zealand and Tokyo will all be thinking about the same thing. You know what? A virus that is invisible to the naked eye, and that will be the conversation in every home, breakfast, lunch, and supper. From Milwaukee to Brazil. And from Moscow to London. And from Melbourne, Australia to Los Angeles. From Jerusalem to New York. This will be the conversation by breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Say you're crazy. And that's exactly what happened. The whole world came under lockdown. Suddenly, everything we're accustomed to is gone. What can this accomplish? We can fall into the quagmire. We can surrender to the quagmire of despair, or it could become a springboard for unprecedented awareness of who we really are and what we're really capable of. Who are we really? We are divine agents in this world. What are we capable of? We're capable of creating a world that is harmonious and one. What is our calling? Our calling is to teach ourselves, our loved ones, our communities, our people, and all of humanity those ideas that Maimonides introduces as the ultimate crescendo of human history and of Jewish history. When I will look in the mirror and you will look in the mirror, and instead of just seeing an ego, a narcissist, a insecure person filled with trauma and skeletons and demons and ghosts, a person with toxicity and problems and baggage, which we all have, and for that we have good Jewish therapists or not Jewish therapists, I will be able to see the most important quality, and that is, who am I and who are you? I am God's light shining in this world. You are God's light shining in this world. I have my unique light to shine, and you have your unique light to shine. When I shine my light, it helps you shine your light, and conversely. And therefore, we're all completely one. We're all unified. We're all integrated. This is our role today, so that when Mashiach comes very speedily in our days, this will be a natural transition. The whole world will experience itself as completely one, part of the absolute oneness of the divine, which vibrates through every nook and cranny, through every detail, every cell and every atom, every electron and every quark, every single item of existence in our planet and all of the cosmos, from the black hole to a tiny mosquito. It's divine energy that vibrates through it all, and therefore we are completely one. This is the future that Maimonides foresaw 900 years ago when he completed this magnum opus that we complete tonight. May we observe it, and may we not only observe it, but initiate it and live it and breathe it. Beginning tonight, I wanted to say when you go home, but I know that you're home. But when you go out of the room where you're watching the Zoom and you go into the dining room or the living room, I want you to be able to look at the person in your house and look at yourself and see that each of us is a divine light in this world, and therefore we are completely one, so that we should be able to see in our own selves and in the people around us and in the world around us that moment Maimonides says will be here very, very soon with God's grace, when the world will be filled with divine knowledge like water covers the sea. Amen. Thank you very, very much.
This class is brought to you by theyeshiva.net. Please help us continue the classes. Make even a small contribution at www.theyeshiva.net/donate.